WeInfuse podcast episode number 7. Welcome to the WeInfuse podcast, where we take the confusion out of infusion. And in each episode, our desire is to give you really a behind-the-scenes look at the infusion industry, the clinical side and the business side, and to give you tips, tools, and a roadmap to successfully launch and streamline your current practice. And in this particular episode, we have Kevin Lyons on the show, and he's the executive director of the RNS, the Rheumatology Nurses Society. Really just brings a whole lot to the table, especially when it comes to equipping nurses, specifically in the rheumatology context, and also dealing with workforce-related issues. And that's what we're going to get into in this episode. So I will let you listen in. Let's get started. All right. Today we have on the show Kevin Lyons, Executive Director of RNS, that is the Rheumatology Nurses Society, and Amanda Mixon, a PA with the rheumatology practice in Fort Collins, Colorado. And Amanda is the Workforce Committee Chair for RNS. So guys, thank you for being on the show today.
Hey, thanks, Dylan.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yep. And we are at the RNS conference here in Fort Worth, Texas. I talked to some people. I sat at a table earlier with some ladies from, I think they were from Massachusetts or something, and I asked them what they were doing in their spare time, and one of them went to see the deal where they take the cattle through the streets.
Actually, we took our board of directors on Monday night out boot shopping to prepare for our president's dinner tonight, and we got the tail end of the cattle drive.
Nice.
Yeah. Fort Worth has been a great town for us.
Really has, yeah.
So this is our 11th annual conference, and we appreciate WeInfuse coming out. You guys are exhibiting. How's the exhibit hall working for you?
It's been great. Yeah, we did. We especially the opening morning. There were so many people. It was really, really neat, and really neat to connect with so many nurses. Awesome. I mean, because just like you guys, I'm sure. I mean, we attend a lot of conferences, but it's neat to be so focused on nurses.
Right. And one of the unique things that has occurred over the past year or so, and that's why Amanda's with us today, is as a PA, she's the Workforce Committee Chair on the RNS Board of Directors. And so the RNS was originally established as the Rheumatology Nurses Society for registered nurses, and now we've added for registered nurses as well as nurse practitioners and physician assistants and PAs. That allows us to take all of the education that we're producing and really share it with a broader audience and ultimately impact patients better.
So for people listening to this podcast that maybe don't know about Rheumatology Nurses Society, can you give us just a little bit of background about what RNS is and what your mission is? Sure.
So the RNS, we're a nonprofit association. We are a specialty nursing association. So we were recognized by the American Nurses Association back in 2012 as rheumatology nursing specialties. Before that, there wasn't a specialty. I mean, rheumatology is kind of new per se in the medical field. So as a nonprofit, we are a membership-based society. We also are an ANCC, which is American Nursing Credentialing Center, accredited provider of education. So we accredit all of our activities. And then we also produce the core curriculum for rheumatology nursing, as well as we have the scope and standards of practice for rheumatology nursing, which just today, the American Nursing Association has approved our second edition of the scope and standards of practice, which Dr. Sherry Carter, who is a former president of the RNS, was the chair of that committee. And so we've really kind of taken the specialty role of rheumatology and nursing, advancing it forward to provide the education. When we used to have conversations in the early days we are only 10 years old, celebrating our 11th year, we would have these educational conversations of what is the educational gaps in rheumatology for nurses and advanced practice providers. And the gap was everything. There was nothing. There was not any substantial body of education for them. So that's where over the years we've developed the core curriculum. We've held 10 annual, this is our 11th annual conferences. We have over 20 contact hours, but what's unique over the past year or two is we've also added in AAPA credit so that our PA friends can also come and join and take advantage of the education that's here. We also do some other things. We do a 2-day forum series, which we did one in San Diego back in February. We have one coming up in DC in November, and we were doing 3 more next year. And those are 2-day intensive conferences where we look at immunology, applied immunology to autoimmune disease. We go through a lot of the mechanism of action. We go through a lot of understanding cytokines, and then we flip it to disease state education and do a lot of focus also on gamification during our conferences, which I think is kind of innovative. We use games like Kahoot and so forth, where the whole audience competes with each other and the learning style. So it's super fun, and we're a big believer in all of our live events. If you have fun, you get the outcomes. And we always keep it light, we keep it polished, and everyone has a great time. So RNS is live events. We also produce the Rheumatology Nurse Practice publication, which is free for anyone. You can go to rnsnurse.org and sign up for that. Amanda has participated in a lot of those activities, and we also do a ton of dinner programs. We just finished up a series in 10 cities on RA. We have a new series coming out on lupus, where we're going to be in 8 cities here in the fall. So again, go to the website, rnsnurse.org, take a look. We'll have the schedule up there probably next week, and basically come out, we'll buy you a free steak, and you get 2 hours of accredited activity, and everyone has a good time. And we also leave chapters behind. We have a lot of chapters out there. So one of the big things that I'm super happy to invited Amanda is we're really looking at workforce. The 2015 workforce report came out, and basically, we were joking in the board meeting this week. We call it Rheumageddon. So it's the quote-unquote impending doom of rheumatology. But seriously, though, there's a shortage of rheumatologists, a shortage of fellowships coming in, and many of your listeners, I would assume, would be familiar with that report. And the RNS is uniquely positioned to recruit, retain, and develop RNs, nurse practitioners, as well as physician assistants to come in and fill the gaps, to reduce patient time, to get the patients the care they need when they need it, without them going through disease, severe disease activity. So we have a whole bunch of workforce strategy that we're going to be releasing. Maybe we can have another podcast another day as we start revealing that, to recruit RNs and Ps and PAs. But also we want to have some conversations, and we have some webinars and some our own broadcasts that are coming up in the future that's going to be town hall like, where we're talking to a lot of rheumatologists as well who have NPs and PAs in their practice, and we're going to have these conversations of how did you find an NP PA, what was your experience with them, what was your concerns and fears with them, and how did you fully implement them into your practice, into a success story. So that's a lot, and I know this isn't a solo podcast here, so I'll be fine for Dylan.
No, that's great, though, because it's so good to talk about these things. There's a lot of people that may not know there's a shortage, and I know I have a niece that just finished nursing school, and I don't know if she knows there's a shortage of rheumatology nurses, and right. I think a lot of people think, well, there's all these people in nursing school, the market might be flooded, because it's kind of like at one time everybody wanted to either be a lawyer or a doctor, right. and then you hear become a nurse, there's guaranteed work or whatever, but there's still so much opportunity. Sure. And we know, being in this space, there's a growing need for medical care, and there's new offices and providers just spreading up all over. I know on the infusion side, there's new infusion suites opening. Right. It seems like on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the business models are changing rapidly. I mean, from the challenges with access to care, the challenges with the prior auths, and all the treatment guidelines. I mean, it's a rapidly changing, evolving specialty of rheumatology. But with nursing, there is a shortage of nurses, but at the same time, we hear a lot of times that there's difficulty in nurses and students finding jobs, and that's some of our messaging that Amanda's championing. Of how do we get out there and build awareness of the specialty of rheumatology, to RNs and the NPs and PAs, especially when they're coming out of college, out of the NP and PA schools, and then also let them know that they're in high demand. I mean, we see each other at a lot of other conferences. I think we were at CCR, we were at FSR, and all the other acronyms of rheumatology scope. And we get rheumatologists coming up to us at every conference, and they're asking us, how can I hire an NP? How can I hire a PA? Where can I find them? Where can I find an RN? Our infusion suites, lagging behind because our RNs are overtaxed. We can't turn our chairs over, the way we want to. And unfortunately, the answer is you can't find a rheumatology RN, or a PA or an NP easily. you have to generally recruit one from another specialty or a student or someone who's in primary care, and then train them and then implement them. And that's, it's kind of a tar pit that I think, rheumatology is in right now, is finding, training, and implementing, to the point where you actually get the ROI from a business model, you get the benefit, and ultimately the patient load, gets taken care of, and they're getting the care they need. So there is a shortage, but there's also difficulty in finding jobs. But then it's almost like red meat and lions for rheumatology, I think, because even though there's a shortage, we have the ability of quickly educating NPs, RNs, and NPAs and put them into the workforce. So if you know someone who's an RN, NP, and PA that wants to come into rheumatology, there's a lot of practices that would love to hire you.
That's so helpful. And Amanda, on your side, being a PA at a practice in Colorado, you're also heavily involved with RNS and championing workforce issues. What's one thing, from your area of expertise as it pertains to workforce issues, what's something you would want our listeners to learn from your experience so far in that?
Yeah, I think, we all want to practice to the top of what our license is. I think that's what I think about it. And I've certainly, heard of friends or, in school that are not able to do that. Nurses, nurse practitioners, PAs. And the thing I love about rheumatology is that, it's a complex specialty, but in the right practice, you really can be autonomous. You can see these patients, you can diagnose them, you can watch them get better. We have these emerging therapies, and, it's just, it makes my day to see somebody go from not being able to walk to walking again. And so this is a specialty that I really want people to consider. I think a lot of people don't know about it. A lot of people don't know about rheumatology. I think probably most of, the listeners to this do, but there's a lot of students that don't quite understand that it's a field that's not just, elderly people with arthritis. It's fun, it's exciting, it's complex. And I think there's a lot of job satisfaction that goes along with it.
Oh, absolutely. I see a lot of before and after pictures, even at these trade shows or conferences that we go to, and it's amazing to see some of these before and after pictures of patients that have these chronic diseases, and they get these cutting edge procedures or treatments, and next thing you know, they're maybe not 100% symptom free, but complete life change. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty amazing. You really are changing people's lives.
Truly.
Well, let's talk specifically about your experience in your practice on the clinical side. Obviously, in every practice, there's struggles, there's breakthroughs. Tell us about one of the big struggles that you guys have experienced in your practice. If there's a particular story you can share that could be an encouragement to others.
Yeah, I think, that's twofold, because, I think there's certainly a struggle of a patient that you see that's really, really sick, and they don't have access to getting the medication that they need. That is something that, perhaps they don't have insurance, or, we know that they need this particular drug, and it's a challenge to get it. And that is such a huge issue. But then, we have, we have the pharmaceutical companies that will help us, that will get these medications for these patients. And you can actually see them go from, feeling just completely like lost to, again, that flip where they're doing so much better and they're in remission, and they're then able to get a job because their disease is under much better control. And so, obviously we have to always play the insurance company game. But, when we do get these medications, speaking of infusion, when we get these patients on these medications and we see them do much better, it's a game changer.
Yeah, that's great. And that's one thing we hear a lot too. I probably talk to different, 1, 2, 3 different practices a day sometimes from all over the U.S., and they all share stories of challenges. And most of the time, I'd say those challenges are lopsided in the direction of access issues, insurance companies, the whole benefits investigation process, and just trying to make sure that patient has access to that drug in a consistent manner. And
really on that, I think, this is another powerful part of RNS is, our advocacy efforts, that we push out there. We're part of a couple of different coalitions that are focusing on transparency and pricing, that focus on, the pharmacy benefit managers and their role and providing transparency and eliminating that. And so, that's another part of RNS. And I think, back to your listeners is, don't underestimate the power that you have of being able to affect change in policy. I used to think that DC was this complicated thing that you would have to be trained and do all the the stuff that was difficult to go to the Hill and to talk to a member, a congressman. But working with organizations like Arthritis Foundation, Lupus Foundation of America, we've actually have sent many of our board members, up there and advocating. It's so easy to join, even if it's to the point of signing on to a letter or calling your state representative. You can make those changes. There's a great organization that's friends of ours, a CSRO, which is Coalition of State Rheumatology Organizations. And they have a great website that also has a lot of information about how you can get involved and affect those changes and some of the upcoming bills. I mean, there's the accumulators and a lot of the Part B and Part D things that are coming up. So I just throw that out there to keep your eyes open, and you can also make a difference on that.
That's so great, because we did another podcast episode a while back with Brian Nyquist from the NICA, and just and on the infusion side, I mean that's what the NICA does, is provide a voice and a platform for pushing for patient access and all these things. And
NICA, the infusion group he's with, or he's executive director with, they were very instrumental in the Part B, efforts that CSRO was working on. They actually, I think, got to the point where they were called by the top person of Congress and said, please stop calling our offices because they were blocking our phone lines. I mean, they just rolled out this massive advocacy challenge. So, that goes all the way back to you, Amanda, is with, access. I mean, ultimately, you see the patient effect of that firsthand, and I could only imagine, as not being the clinician, what that impact is when you tell a patient, well, there is help for you, but you can't have it.
Right. I mean, or, you prescribe, let's say you prescribe Remicade for for a patient, and then it's, 2-3 months later before the patient actually gets started on it because of these issues. And so that's definitely a challenge.
Well, it's great to know people can link up with you guys, especially for rheumatology, and be part of a more influential voice and actually push forth for issues. A lot of people think, well, what can I do? I'm just this one person at this one practice. And like you said, there's a lot you can do. And I'm a huge fan of taking initiative and taking action instead of sitting back and just waiting for something to happen. That doesn't work out too well. So that's great that you guys are doing that. Well, going into another story, especially with the practice that you're involved with, Amanda, tell us I know you're a PA, you've seen lots of patients, you've seen lots of things. What's one light bulb moment or big success story, or just something really neat that you've experienced in your practice with a patient?
Yeah. So I can think of, I'm actually, I have one of the first times I ever used a biologic in a patient, and this was a patient with ankylosing spondylitis, and he was a younger guy, and I started him. So he comes into the office, he's not doing well, and so we decided that a biologic's the appropriate therapy for him. And I'm very new to rheumatology. This is, 11 years ago. And about 6 weeks later, he came back and he wanted to see me. He didn't have an appointment. And initially I was thinking, oh my gosh, what happened? And what he did is he went to an exam room, and I came in, and he bent over and he tied his shoes. And that was so significant to him because prior to being on this medication, he was not able to do that. His son had to do it for him. And that was one of those light bulb moments for me of, oh my gosh, I'm in this field that truly can change people's lives. And I have so many stories like that, but it just made me so encouraged about medicine and encouraged, and just feel so blessed that I am a provider, that I'm able to do this, and got me excited about teaching, and teaching other students and getting them involved in rheumatology, and so I try to do that, take students, get them excited about this field that a lot of people just don't know about.
That's awesome. And I happen to have a family member actually that has ankylosing spondylitis. It, now people know about it, but back, 30 years ago, there weren't too many people. You wouldn't meet somebody that, you knew, oh yeah, I have a family member that has that too. Mm-hmm. But there at the time, 30 years ago or whatever, there weren't all these therapies, through infusion or whatever. So that's awesome. That's an awesome story. From that, like you said, that was kind of a light bulb moment. What's one thing you would want our listeners to take away from that moment?
And I will kind of circle back to, I'm a physician assistant, and, I'm not a rheumatologist. I certainly don't claim to be a rheumatologist, but in this field, there is such a need for rheumatology providers, and we really can make this huge impact. And we all can, from an NP perspective, from a PA perspective, and from an RN perspective. Our nurse, our infusion nurse, helps us with the clinical trials as well. And so she's there, helping and doing, joint counts and that's kind of looking to the future of what future therapies that we're going to have. So there's just, it's an exciting time, and it's an exciting time to be in rheumatology, and there's so much that we can do, not being the rheumatologist.
That's great. Yeah, that's good to know, because some people may think, I don't have much to offer that practice because my focus hasn't been rheumatology,
Yeah.
But you're saying that shouldn't be a limiting barrier for you to get into it.
Absolutely not. I mean, and organizations like RNS that have such great education. I mean, I can't speak highly on it. That's actually how I got involved in RNS. Is I saw some of their publications, and I said, hey, you guys have to incorporate PAs, or please incorporate us, because we need that education. And, through when I take students, I actually show them the core curriculum, and I say, here, take this home, look at this. This is what they learn from. And we can get people that don't have any rheumatology experience, and then they come into rheumatology and they're learning, and then they're able to do the same thing, same thing that I'm doing.
Man, I mean, I'm getting kind of stirred up to study rheumatology.
Yeah, you should.
I'm in software sales.
Well, Amanda just came off stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Finished a couple of sessions here in Fort Worth at the conference. But no, and it is true. I mean, there's such a need. There's such a need, but also such an opportunity. I mean, we have a series of dinner programs we're doing next year that are actually engaging with NP and PA students, helping them make a decision as they graduate to enter into rheumatology as a specialty. And we're telling them that the work-life balance and just from a workplace standpoint is amazing. To work in rheumatology, you're not in the ER at 6 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday or whatever. And also, if you want to be published, if you want to shape the future of rheumatology,
Yes.
if you want to be involved in research, if you want to really help invent how this world of rheumatology works. I mean, rheumatology is a fresh specialty. Now, biologic therapies, I think 15, 16, 17 years ago was the first one. So it's, not saying it's brand new, but at the same time, you can still put your impact on it. You can leave your fingerprints on it and affect the future of patient care. So it's an exciting specialty for it. And with, to Amanda's point, on, the practice and the light bulb element and things, one of the things that we're going to be really having a lot of discussion around the scope and license. And what is the scope of practice? What can a registered nurse do? I think that there's two things. There's myth, and then there's licensure. And sometimes myth can turn into culture of, maybe a practice is concerned about a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant seeing the first-time patient. Maybe, they're only thrown the comorbidity management or only thrown, fibromyalgia patients because there's not a trust there or there's not a comfort level there. I think there's a lot of opportunity to have discussions around that to say, what does that look like and how can we fix that and how can we prepare the workplace for the workforce? So if there's a workforce shortage and we're bringing workforce in, and if nurse practitioners and PAs are going to be a huge part of the prescriber element of that, and of course registered nurses is a fundamental necessity in the practice, you have to prepare the workplace. We have to talk about things like culture and job satisfaction and really scope of practice, helping that be understood.
So now you've really got my interest peaked. So what do you think is one of the biggest myths that you would want a nurse to know if the nurse is thinking about, or maybe even somebody that's not yet a nurse, but they're thinking about the opportunity of rheumatology? What's a myth that you would want them to deal with before they head that way?
I think the myth I was kind of referring to is more within what can they do and can't they do. But to kind of demystify that a little bit, not to play off of that, is, registered nurses, they can do joint counts. They can run DAS scores. They can do a lot of those elements. I'm not a clinician. I don't work in practice, so this is just from my observational understanding. But Amanda, even with PAs and NPs, we've talked to a lot of rheumatologists, and some of them can operate autonomously, some of them can't. And it's not that they can't, it's just the practices, for whatever reason, it may be a a policy or something they have that they choose for them not to. And so we're looking at a lot of these models out there. Dr. Caldron, he spoke at our conference this week. He and Dr. Tesser have great practices out in Arizona. And they have a model where they have one rheumatologist and they have 3 advanced practice providers, which would mean NPs or PAs, working with that one rheumatologist. They have 27 advanced practice providers within their practice, and they're just, they're excelling. They're, in taking care of patients. So there's a lot of conversations around how can advanced practice providers scale a practice, and that's where I think there's some myths around whether or not, to segue a little bit, we have conversations at our exhibit booths many times with rheumatologists as well as industry partners. So we recognize the need of industry, the need of our biologic therapies, but even a lot of the sales reps from the industry, when we tell them, and they were talking to an NP or PA, and we tell them, well, they're a prescriber. Well, what do you mean a prescriber? Does the rheumatologist need to sign off on your prescription? Well, no, they based upon the state licensure of where they're at and what their scope of practice is, they can prescribe. We have Iris Zink, the immediate past president of the RNS. She actually is a nurse practitioner in Lansing, Michigan. She opened her own practice. So she is primary, it's her practice. Now she has a collaborating physician agreement, but she prescribes, she diagnoses, and so forth. Again, it is not a competitive, or it's not a replacement for rheumatologists whatsoever, and none of the RNS board or any of the people we speak with ever say that they are, in lieu of a rheumatologist per se. Right. But at the same time, they definitely can scale the practice and ultimately, reduce the burden of wait times on patients and have the patients treated much quicker.
Absolutely. It's a team. We are a team. So I have a wonderful rheumatologist that I work with, and he is there for me. And I talk to him, about complex patients, and, we go through things and he teaches. And, I've been doing this for 11 years and I still am learning. And, but absolutely, we play a huge role, particularly moving forward.
Yeah, and we hear that a lot too, talking with different practices all around the U.S. And of course, we talk to rheumatology practices, gastro practices, neurology practices, but a lot of them from the business model side, which is what I tend to focus more on with my role at WeInfuse, is a lot of these practices are structured that way, where you have a physician that kind of plays a role of medical director for the most part, and then you have a nurse practitioner and PAs and nurses really doing a lot of the interaction with the patients. And we see that a lot. So like you said, though, not at all to replace providers or anything, but it's just there is a growing kind of trend in that direction as far as scaling a business model. What would you say, and I know this is a tough question to answer because there's so many things going on like we alluded to before. What would you say are you guys most excited about right now in rheumatology?
Oh, there's so many things I'm so excited about. I really am excited to see more PAs and nurse practitioners and nurses go into rheumatology, because I think even 10 years ago, it was funny, when I first got into rheumatology, I rarely met anybody else that was in rheumatology. And now it's becoming more and more because people are getting excited about that. So that the future looks very bright for rheumatology, nurse practitioners, PAs, and nurses. It really does. And people just have to open their eyes to it. That's
good. That's a good answer. What about you?
I would ditto that. I would also say I'm very excited about the educational strategy that the RNS is pushing forward next year, because we realize that as these, it's our responsibility to make sure that when a nurse, when a PA, when a nurse practitioner wants to come into rheumatology, that we have the tools and the resources needed for them to be able to be successful in their career in rheumatology, and for them to stay in rheumatology, and for them to also tell their colleagues about rheumatology and create a groundswell of activity into rheumatology. And so I'm excited about the educational strategy that the RNS, our board of directors and our committees, they're phenomenal as far as their approach to education design, their approach to educational delivery, their willingness to sit with me in days and days of meetings talking to partners to make it happen from a business model side. And so we have an exciting 2019 ahead of us, and hopefully we'll be able to share some more of that with your viewers or listeners in the future. But again, if you go to rnsnurse.org, we also, you find a lot of information there. We're also very active on Facebook. We have probably one of the larger, rheumatology presences there, as well as Instagram. Instagram's been fantastic for us as far as getting news and bits and pieces of information out. And even, if you're listening to this, we also have all of our conference videos. We have a ton of educational content on our website that's available, even if you're not a member, because we believe in putting our best stuff out there. And then if you like our best stuff, you're going to come be part of the tribe and help us create even better stuff. And so come and visit the website, enjoy the material on there. Check out a local chapter, look for a dinner program in your area. Join us in DC in November for our 2-day event that we have there on education, and get involved.
That's so good. Yeah, you guys are really equipping people and propelling them forward. So this is going to be one last question that, again, is going to be hard to answer. What is one final parting piece of advice for our listeners?
Well, I assume that a lot of these listeners are already in rheumatology, but stay in rheumatology. The future's bright. That's what I would say. That's what I would say.
And I would just say participate.
Yeah,
Participate.
I think that's really good too.
Be a voice for your patients. Be a voice, for your profession. Be a voice for your specialty.
I love that. Yeah, be proactive, not reactive. Get involved, right?
That's right.
I love that. That's great. Well, guys, thank you so much for being on the show, because there's a lot of our listeners that may not be involved in rheumatology, and you've just totally lit a flame to inspire them to think more about that. And a lot of our listeners don't realize resources that are available like RNS, and now they do. Now they know they can tap into all those resources. So it's just great to share these resources with our listeners, and we really appreciate you guys being on the show.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you.
Thanks for the invitation.
All right, that concludes our interview. And if you listen to some of the things they said, it's just critical to make sure you have some of those business practices in place. And that's really what WeInfuse is designed to do, to enable you to focus on the clinical side, knowing that the scary, stressful side of the infusion practice, the benefits investigation process, the scheduling, making sure you have your I's dotted and T's crossed. That's what that software does, is it puts that platform in place. And so if you haven't done so yet, be sure to check out WeInfuse.com and schedule a demo to learn more about how WeInfuse can simplify the entire infusion practice. And we are much more than a software company. We really aim to provide tips, tools, and tactics that can help you simplify the whole process overall. This is Dylan McCabe with the WeInfuse podcast. Thank you for listening and joining the program, and we will catch you in the next episode.